So how did the Industrial Revolution impact jobs? Did it create jobs? Did it destroy jobs? The answer is, it's pretty complicated. I'm Darren, and this is the Industrial Revolution. So when I first told my friends I was setting up a channel for the Industrial Revolution technology, one of them asked me exactly that question. What happened to jobs during the Industrial Revolution? And actually, one of my Patreon members mentioned a while ago that he was actually pretty interested in the economic impact of the Industrial Revolution. So today, I'm going to try to answer some of those questions. But as I said, it's really complicated, and I can't give you a full answer. I can't give you numbers, and we have to really focus down tight. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus down, instead of Industrial Revolution, we're going to shrink that down a little bit. We're going to look at flour. And flour is one of the first things that really created the Industrial Revolution, going from hand grinding to milling. And it's also one of the fairly quantifiable things that hit all over the world. So as soon as humans started settling down and moved from a hunter-gatherer lifestyle into a horticultural lifestyle, grain was one of the big crops that they grew. And you can eat grains whole, but you can also grind them into flour. And this is how they did that at first. This is a mortar and pestle. I'm going to be talking about a lot of specific objects, and many of these were developed all over the world by lots of different cultures. If you know anything by a different name, the name you're using is probably also correct. It's just, I'm using the name from one area, you're using a name from a different area. Put those names down in the comments, please, and let me know if you know it, where that came from. So the mortar and pestle is a big stone bowl called a mortar, and a pestle. Pestle in this case is a small round bottom piece of stone. You've probably used these or seen them used. People use them all the time in cooking to grind up spices. You may have used it in a chemistry class to grind up solids to use in your chemical tests. And what you do is you put the corn in here and crush and grind this, and you grind it into flour. A lot of crushing going on here, as much crushing as there is grinding, but it does work. Now this is a small one, and these things got big. By big, I mean, they could be this big, they could be 2-3 feet deep. The common trait is you're going to have rounded bottom and steep walls on the sides here to prevent the grain from getting out. So we know the mortar and pestle's been around for at least 35,000 years. It's been found all over the world, independently developed in some form or other, simply because it's a system that works. Now, it's not easy. It takes hours a day to grind enough flour for your family. Remember, this is a time when the majority of your calories actually came from flour, came from bread, initially unleavened bread, later on leavened bread, potentially with everyone eating 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day. This actually led to the development of what's called a quern. So querns initially were actually just two flat pieces of stone. You'd have one flat piece, you'd put the grain on, and you just grind back and forth to grind the flour. As you did this for a while though, the bottom one obviously would develop a depression in it. And initially the flour could fall off easy, the grain could fall off easy. Once the depression was formed in it, that actually would hold the grain better. So those actually became considerably more common to intentionally hold the grain. And you may have seen these around, you may have seen these in anthropology, archaeology textbooks. They are fairly common, again, all over the world. They're called saddle querns. These are about 5,000 years ago. The oldest ones have been found, which doesn't mean that's the oldest, those are just the oldest that are found. Well, a couple thousand years ago, we had a period of fairly rapid development. Instead of having that much more manual process, instead of having every household do everything on their own, you started to move into rotary developments. This is called a rotary quern, also called a hand mill, or again, many other names. And this works sort of the same way. You have a big heavy disc on top, you'd put flour between the discs, and you'd rotate it to grind. Now you may have to put some weight on here because this top stone is just not that heavy for all the crushing you need to do. Flour would accumulate around the outside, and this is a fairly complex one. Initially, they just fall out to the outside. This is also how horizontal water wheels worked. Now, if we look closely, you can see that this is actually fairly straight, but the bottom, this stone is dressed, and that's going to actually control where the grain goes and help to channel it properly. There's a little pin in the middle to keep this in place, and that lets this turn. So the next big development was actually pretty much these. You started off with horizontal water wheels, and then you eventually moved to vertical water wheels, which had more ability to power this. The very early ones ran just a single wheel. They quickly realized you could actually chain them together. One of the big ones is the Berbegal aqueduct and mill. It had a 19-meter drop from top to bottom, an aqueduct coming in from the top, and it split in half, and each side went through 8 different mills, overshot wheels. You have an overshot wheel to go down, the next overshot wheel, the next overshot wheel. Each wheel powered one of these, and estimates are that it could grind between 4.5 and 28 tons of grain every day, and could feed somewhere between 10 and 40,000 people every day. And really, that's what we still have today when you're looking at millstones like this. It's the same technology, works the same way. It's just, we're a little bit more efficient here. Now let's take a look at jobs. If we look at the very beginning, the mortar and pestle. The mortar and pestle didn't take away any jobs, didn't create any jobs, it just made it possible to eat, except it actually also created farming. So you could say that the job of farmer was created by the mortar and pestle. The quern, the saddle quern, they saved time, but they didn't really create or destroy any jobs. You're still grinding all your grain in your household. So it was still an individual process. You just have a little more free time on your hand, which that of course meant you did something else. When you moved to something like this, though, now you're talking something different. When you're looking at the small village mill, the village mill may serve an area about 5 miles around. People are bringing grain in by horse-drawn cart, the individual farmers. You take a percentage of it as a miller, and they take the rest of the flour back home, and they have to sell it themselves. And that actually did create jobs. It created the job of the miller. The miller would work there, possibly with his family, possibly with a couple of apprentices, possibly with family and apprentices to operate the mill. And it didn't cost any jobs. It gave every household a couple extra hours a day. And a mill like this could grind all the flour they needed for a year pretty quick. So that part of the Industrial Revolution actually created jobs. Now, when you move into the regional mill, now you have a different story. The regional mill, which was located on canals, and I'm here at the Ludwig mill here at Providence Metro Park, one of the Toledo Metro Parks. And just beyond that wall is the Miami and Erie Canal. The mill was built here on the canal. And regional mills might run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Regional mills, instead of running 1 or 2 stones like the local mills, regional mills might run dozens of stones or more. And that means they're producing a whole lot more flour. You're going to have more than one master miller. You'll probably have some journeyman millers, and you'll have a lot of apprentices. So the regional mill created a ton of jobs where it was located. To locate a regional mill like that, a large mill, You have to have a lot of water, a large drop, or preferably both. Now, that means that little local mills scattered all over the whole region, they can't compete anymore. So those mills close up. So you'd have one big regional mill would open, and it'd replace 50 local mills. Instead of having 50 separate millers, you'd have 2 or 3. You'd also add some journeymen. Instead of having a couple apprentices at each local mill, now you've got 30 or 40 apprentices working at this one, so less total apprentices. So it's really tempting to say this cost a lot of jobs. But did it? Remember at the beginning I said that it's complicated. And here's why this is complicated. The reason that these mills can exist is because you have the canals and the railroads that are now supplying them with grain and are able to then take away the processed flour. Well, those canals and those railroads exist in part because of that grain, actually, because of the regional mills. They were built to move bulk goods. So part of that, the very first ones were built over in England. They were built to move coal. But quickly it was realized that they could just as efficiently, or maybe even more efficiently, move food. They could move people. So they allowed for grain to be ground centrally in large amounts, shipped in large amounts, shipped to large cities, and actually allow those large cities to exist. So the fact that you close down these local mills seems like it costs jobs, but the fact that you created railroads and you created canals created jobs. So that's why it's complicated. You did take away miller jobs, you did take away apprentice jobs in the mills, but you created railroad and canal construction jobs. You created canal boat captain positions. You created mule driver positions on the canals. You created lockmasters. You created railroad engineers and firemen and brakemen. All of these other positions were created in part because of the regional flour mills. So was there a net loss, net gain? It's really hard to say. But one thing that I can say with a great degree of certainty is that the job you're working today would not have existed without the Industrial Revolution, at least not the way it does. Even if you're a farmer today, think of how you're farming compared to how pre-Industrial Revolution farmers worked. They would have a 5-acre farm. They're using horse-drawn plows if they were lucky. So the Industrial Revolution really created your job. And like other revolutions, whether there's a net loss or a net gain is really complicated. Even if you look at the modern ones, let's look at, the last one to hit really is outsourcing. And IT outsourcing, for example, is something that's really big right now, where local IT workers who are told, this is the best career to go into, it's where the future is. And then after working in the field for 10, 20, 30 years, whatever, suddenly your job is outsourced to India. Okay, your job was lost. So this outsourcing is costing jobs, right? Well, net, is it really costing jobs, or is it just moving jobs from expensive countries to less expensive countries? An IT person loses a job in the US and an IT person gets a job in India. That's no net loss. Jumping back to the Industrial Revolution, the local miller loses their job because of the regional mill, and people gain jobs in the big cities, and that led people to move to the big cities. So net job loss, net job gain, it's complicated. So almost everything in the Industrial Revolution has nuances, has those kinds of complications, and that really makes it interesting. And That's really a key part of the Industrial Revolution. Before you go, I do need some help. Easiest thing you can do to help is simply like the video, also subscribe and hit notify. That goes a long ways towards telling YouTube, hey, these videos are worth watching, the channel's good, and it'll show it to more people. More people I have come in, bigger the channel grows. Also, if you can comment or participate over in the discussion tabs, that also goes a long ways towards helping with the video stats. It shows YouTube that people are actually participating and getting involved. I have a Patreon page at patreon.com/Industrial Revolution if you want to help out there as well. Anyway, thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you at the next one.